Chicago's Morning Answer continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Welcome back to Chicago's Morning Answer. I'm John Anthony, filling in for Dan and Amy with my good friend Charles Thomas, former ABC 7 reporter. Charles, what's up, man? You okay?
Hey, man, I'm getting ready for the bell lap. Is that what they call it? The stretch run.
We're in the stretch run right now, Charles. But Charles, I don't know if you've heard about the assault that's coming on homeschooling here in the state of Illinois. It doesn't just affect, and I think what a lot of people don't understand about what happens here, not just Illinois, but I'll say probably every state house. Once you give an inch, they'll take a country mile. So if once the door has been opened up, no matter whatever the subject matter is, once you open up the door, especially the left, they will take a country mile, and now they want to put some restraints on homeschooling. Charles.
Well, you know that it's ironic that we would be talking about this bill, which was just introduced a day after, not a day after, but during the same week that the new education secretary is confirmed in Washington, given the fact that she wants to release, all these government mandates from education.
Yeah.
And here we are in Illinois going just the opposite direction. I mean, it's like the Democratic powers that be, Democratic Party powers that be are so disconnected from where the rest of the country is going and headed.
I definitely agree, Charles. And one of the reasons why I voted against even the agreed bills as related to school choice and things of that nature. Even the agreed bills, I voted against them all because my principle stands. I felt like Thomas Massie, the congressman from Kentucky, I'm not going to violate the principle that I believe in as it relates to education, as it relates to our kids and protecting our kids. And one of the greatest way to protect our kids, and I know they're talking about what happens. There's no you don't know what's happening in a home. Kids are being molested and things of that nature. That's one of the things they always try to bring up.
But the other thing, too, is that I think we need to say what generally this bill is about.
Yeah.
It's about the state government setting regulations on families that homeschool.
Correct.
In other words, you're going to have to make reports to the state of Illinois. Yeah. And they're not that detailed. They're not telling what you must teach, and that you have to teach the whole transgender piece or anything like that. But it's a beginning.
Right.
It's like you say, the minute they get their claws set, then they will begin to tell homeschoolers what they must teach, what they must not teach.
Yeah.
All of this, and it's frightening.
You know the saying, but wait, there's more. And that bill that you speak of is House Bill 2827. Joining us to discuss this and more is Will Estrada. He's the senior counsel for the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Talk to us. What is HB 2027? Because you see there's so many things that are being said both on the left and the right as it relates to House Bill 2027. Educate us as to what it actually does to homeschooling and private schools.
Absolutely, John and Charles. First off, thank you for having me on. Thank you for all that you do. So let's first set the stage. Illinois has had some of the best laws when it comes to parents' right to direct the education and upbringing of their children. This dates back to 1950, the landmark Illinois Supreme Court case People versus Levison, which established a framework for families to be able to educate their children at home. There are regulations that are involved with that, but you don't need to report anything to the government. Obviously, the family came first before government. The philosophical term is it's a pre-political right. So I don't really see why we would need to answer to the government, and in particular the public schools. So HB 2827 was introduced by Representatives Tara Costa Howard, Michelle Mussman,
Say enough.
Kelly Cassidy. Yeah, you know who those are. It was introduced on February 6th, and it would overturn 75 years of precedent. It would establish a framework to include greater regulation on homeschools. It would require every family by August 1st of every year to file a homeschool declaration form that includes information on the child, including gender identity. And then if you don't turn that in, you're subject to a truancy charge, which, I mean, it criminalizes a vast swath of parents. It's going to disproportionately affect vulnerable communities. Truancy is no joke. This is a Class C misdemeanor in Illinois, including, upon conviction, a $500 fine and/or up to 30 days in prison. You can have DCFS remove your children from your home if you've got criminal convictions. So it's just a poorly thought out bill. And if that's not enough, it also creates the requirement that every home education family needs to have a homeschool portfolio, a record, and there's a sentence in the bill that says that this can be reviewed for any other investigation, which is so broadly written, there's nothing in the bill limiting it to just one time a year. I mean, the regional offices of education, Chicago Public Schools, the intermediate support centers could come in and literally review a family's educational progress at any time. I mean, remember where we are in Illinois. Only a third of eighth graders, according to the most recent NAEP scores, National Assessment of Educational Progress, are proficient. This bill will now make homeschool families have to answer to the government. And then one final thing, they weren't content to just go after homeschoolers. The bill also puts onerous regulations on traditional brick-and-mortar private schools. They have to collect and report to the government very detailed data on every single family. I hate registrations and reporting. There's nothing good that comes from that when you are mandated to do that to the government. And they have to now register with ISBE, the Illinois State Board of Education. So private schools are being also brought under the thumb of government control. And every single teacher or person in an administrative capacity, so the janitors in private schools, will now need to have a high school diploma.
Is there any refuge to be sought in the courts? I mean, homeschoolers, and they're not taking any money from the state. Why would the state have any right to get involved?
So that's a great question. Illinois, for all the issues on the legislation and in the laws, you do have a state-level Religious Freedom Restoration Act. I know there are large Amish and Mennonite homeschool communities, so we are looking at the option of, for certain families who are people of faith, and again, not just Christian, it can be anything, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, but for families of faith, there may be a refuge in the courts. On the other hand, I'm an attorney, and you never want to, trust in the courts to fix a problem. The best thing we can do is talk to legislators. Homeschooling is a bipartisan issue. It's not just rich white people, it's across the board. Yesterday at the Illinois Christian Home Education Association's an annual cherry pie day on the Capitol, there were 2,000 homeschoolers who came out. They were black, white, Latino, rich, poor, urban, suburban, and they were talking to their Democrat legislators too. And we have heard, particularly the more centrist Democrats are pretty concerned with this bill in its impact on traditional private schools and its impact on homeschoolers.
Are the teachers' unions behind this bill anywhere? Do you see their fingerprints on it?
That is a really interesting question. And at this point, we don't see the teachers' unions behind the bill. The interesting thing is the fingerprints on this bill are from a very small, very not well-known organization called the Coalition for Responsible Home Education. You can Google them. They're a Massachusetts-based lobbying organization. They come across as, we want homeschooling to be around, just, regulated to protect kids. But they are virulently hostile to parental rights. They have a document called the Parental Rights Extremism Messaging Guide, where they say that essentially anyone who's choosing to homeschool their kids is going to abuse, neglect, put their kids under their thumb. That's how they view parents. And they are the ones who drafted this bill and who have actually been lobbying behind the scenes to legislators saying, ignore the phone calls you're getting. Those are all parental rights extremists. You need to pass this bill. So they are actually the ones who are pushing this bill.
Yeah, well, I think I beg to differ with you as far as the CTU, and because I'm looking at some of the sponsors on this bill, and these are bought and paid for by the CTU people. So that's how because I guarantee CTU is reaching out to their people to ensure that that happens. I've served with some of these people that are on this list when I was in the Illinois General Assembly. But you talked about janitors having to have a high school diploma. Section 35 on page 10 requires parents to have a high school diploma or GED?
That is correct. So homeschool parents, you're absolutely correct, will also have to have a high school diploma or a GED. Now, of course, the majority of homeschoolers do, but who's this going to impact? It's going to disproportionately impact, that single mom who's working hard. Maybe she had to drop out of high school and public school in her own life, but, her daughter's being bullied in the public school. She's like, I can do a better job at home. Grandma can get involved. That's who this bill is going to impact, and suddenly this might seem like a minor requirement, but it's going to suddenly, for some families, particularly more vulnerable families, more vulnerable communities, make homeschooling out of reach. It is such an elitist and, offensive bill, especially when there's really been no problem in Illinois. Homeschooling has worked for 75 years. The outcomes of homeschool students are off the charts. It's frankly offensive to see this bill being introduced and being pushed so aggressively.
Well, we got to. I think sometimes we fail to remember that the goal of government is to basically take over the responsibility of parenting from parents, and I think this is one of those things. But when you look on Section 30 on page 9, it requires families to comply with all public school health, medical, and immunization reporting requirements. Now, one thing I know about the General Assembly, you got to watch what words they put in there, because if this can then come back and say everybody that's in the house has to comply with this, correct? As it relates to immunizations and things of that nature.
So that's a great question. Section 30 in HB 2827, as currently written, only applies if your homeschool student is interested in participating in activities in the public school. That would be like driver's ed or sports or anything like that. And those are already fairly limited. Like sports access for homeschoolers in Illinois in the public schools is very limited. So as written, Section 30 is only going to apply if homeschoolers are coming into the public school. But you're absolutely right. It is written in such a way, and we've seen some of Coalition for Responsible Home Education's messaging. They want this to be a mandate on every homeschooler, whether or not they're coming into the public school, and every person in the family. So if HB 2827 gets passed, like you said in your opening remarks, they're coming back next year. They're coming back the year after, and they're going to put even more requirements. And then one other thing, this is on page 12 of the bill, section 905. It says the State Board of Education may adopt any rules necessary to implement and administer this act. That's about the most broadly written grant of regulation and rulemaking authority that you can see. So if this bill gets passed, even if it's not right now in the text, expect the bureaucrats at ISBE to put additional onerous regulations and restrictions on homeschool families without it ever having to go through the General Assembly in years coming.
Charles, you got a question?
Yeah, what about private schools? How are they going to be affected by this bill?
Right. So right now there are the three requirements. Number one, they will have to all register with ISBE. Currently, registration for traditional brick-and-mortar private schools is optional. Many do register, but many, particularly the smaller religious schools, we're talking the Jewish schools, we're talking some of the Muslim schools, we're talking, the Mennonite, Amish, Christian schools, they don't register. And so we've been very excited to see the Illinois Catholic Conference come out strongly, the Association of Christian Schools International, the Non-Public School Association, Illinois. We understand that the Jewish schools are talking with the legislators as well out of concern That's the first requirement. Every school will now be mandated to register. Doesn't matter how small or large, if you're a small religious school, an Amish or Mennonite community, et cetera, et cetera. Second, and what we talked about, that high school diploma requirement, even for the janitor who's sweeping the floors. And then third, there's this significant data collection requirement that now every single private school will have. This is on page 24 of the bill, and what it says is every school will have to submit every attending student's name, date of birth, grade level, home address, the name and home address of at least one parent or guardian of each attending student, and the school shall provide this information to the State Board of Education and the Regional Office of Education.
Wow.
Again, think about the sponsors of this bill. This is a government database of every single family and child in private schools. The homeschoolers are already registered. I just don't like government databases of this sort of information.
Right. You know what? We got to leave it right there. But just in 30 seconds, this is why I want to dump the Department of Education. But how can parents get involved really quickly? You got 30 seconds.
Call your state legislators. The bill is up for a committee hearing on Wednesday, March 12th. Call them. Doesn't matter if you're public, private, homeschool. Ask them to reject HB 2827. When homeschoolers make their voices heard, they have to listen.
That is so true. Will Estrada, thank you so much for joining us on Chicago's Morning Answer. Really appreciate you. I got to have you on my show, Black and Right, really soon. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Signature Bank is Chicago's fastest growing independently owned business bank. It's a bank where